What's up everybody and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the 2024 Audi RS3, installing the ECS Tuning adjustable Swaybar Endlinks. These are going to be replacing the front Swaybar Endlinks, and given that my car is already lowered, it is a good idea to kind of get Endlinks that can help keep the original Swaybar at the perfect angle and everything, and also these are a little bit better quality comparing it to stock. Also with that, if I can get this out of the box, there they are in a nice red powder coating. Of course the adjustments, and very easy to operate. Of course you just tighten and loosen them depending on how large you need these to be. And should be a pretty straightforward installation. I will have these linked down below. They are extremely affordable. ECS also has them for the rear, but today we're just gonna be doing the fronts and see how the car handles afterwards. I'm really interested to see if these will give the car better handling characteristics, given they are much more heavy duty than the kind of thin ones that are on this car factory. And with the wheel off, here is the factory Swaybar Endlink. You can see this bolt right here, and then this silver bar that goes all the way down to the sway bar itself. So in order to remove this, you're just gonna need some basic tools. We have 18mm socket and a set of cutters. Now, the bolt up here, super easy to get to, as you can tell. The secondary one does involve removing the factory brake duct, and if you look underneath here, it is actually attached with zip ties. So Audi, their fantastic engineering, has used zip ties. So we just need to go ahead and cut those so we can pop that off. And with the brake duct off and all the zip ties down, we have much better access to the lower bolt now for the end of the Swaybar Endlink. And now here's a good look at the stock versus the ECS one. So these are just kind of a piece of metal folded to a C shape and then obviously bent in the correct orientation. There's no adjustments or anything. It's basically just like a twisted piece of metal, which I don't think this is the most durable. It's decently thick metal, but nothing really too amazing. This, of course, all nice aluminum, more heavy duty. And of course, we got the cool branding on it, but then this is adjustable. So this should be a lot better for the correct height. So basically, since my car is lowered, that means that the point where the sway bar is attached to is a little higher than stock. So if we want that sway bar to the correct distance away, you want to make sure that we can get this to be pushed down a little bit more. That way it is at the same tension as the factory setup and in the perfect orientation. So as far as handling goes for the 8Y Audi RS3, one thing that I did notice with the lowering springs and the wheel spacer, this car handles a lot better than stock. I think given it's a front wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system, especially if you give it some throttle around a turn, it just gets a little light in the steering, which I'm not a fan of. And already I've seen great improvements in handling just by lowering it with a little bit stiffer spring and having the wider front and rear track with those spacers. So I think with the Endlinks then adjusted to where they're just slightly longer than stock, giving us the exact same basically tension on the sway bar, I think that'll also improve. And I think, just my own kind of thought just by looking at these, I bet there's a little bit of flex in these, which we're not gonna have in the aftermarket ones. And I have seen comments from you guys saying adjustable Endlinks, even in the rear, which I might have to do eventually, are a huge plus for this car just to keep the sway bar's tension perfect. And I think that flex might make a difference. So that's why we're gonna be doing them today. So now I'm just gonna adjust them maybe a ½ inch longer than stock. I think that should be perfect. And then a really good way to just go ahead and measure, make sure everything's perfect, line them both up this way, and you can see end to end on the silver part, and they are both about 14 and almost 7/8. So those are about perfect. When we look at the stock one, this one is closer to 14 and a half. So a little bit longer. I think that is probably a good happy medium. This suspension setup lowered the car about 3/4 of an inch. And obviously the ratio from the inside of the pivot point versus way out here where the wheel is gonna be a little bit less than that. So this goes on the back side, and then the nut is gonna go on the front side. From here, I do have the Loctite on everything, and you're also able to twist this if you need to further adjust anything. So I'm going to measure them all once again since I had to adjust them to get them in. But on the driver's side, the bolt goes on the front. Obviously the bolt goes on the back for this side. And as we make our way to the other side, which I installed off camera just to kind of get my bearings on it, on this one, the bolt goes on the back side, as you can tell, and the rest goes on the front. And then the bolt goes on the back side here as well. So I just wrapped up getting all the bolts nice and tight and made sure all my adjustments were good. It was kind of hard to film everything just because it's a really tight working area. So just to show you on the stock one, on the inside, right where this little silver washer is, on the new ones, there's like a little hex bolt. I just took a small pair of vice grips and clamped that. That way the bolt portion didn't spin as I was tightening the nuts. Now all the nuts have a nylon lock washer built into them, so it did start turning the actual bolt itself. So it's a little tight in there, but that was able to work. With all that said, I then adjusted the black lock nuts to make sure everything is clamped perfectly onto the red portion. And now we can take one last look. So in the upper portion, that bolt nice and tight, going all the way down into the lower end link. And then of course on the other side, we got it all nice and tight, just as you'd expect. And it's looking really good. Pretty straightforward job to do. Nice and tight there. And then next up, last thing to do, we're going to use new zip ties and get these ducts back into place. Alright, driving the car now, I went ahead and kind of did a little lap on some twisty turns just to feel it out. I will say, I feel like the front end is just that much more tight. Now, this car, like I said, has a front-wheel drive bias, all-wheel drive. I think that's the root of my problem with the RS3 is just I'm not used to the front wheels kind of interfering with the steering feel. I love my Supra, the Lambo. You know, my old GTR did not do that with its rear-wheel drive bias, all-wheel drive. So it takes some getting used to with this car. With that said though, you get a little bit of the lighter steering just there when I was first accelerating, but as long as you're not just like pinning boost on and off, the car feels a little smoother and a little bit more weighted up front. It definitely has made some sort of small adjustment, and I've seen a lot of you guys commenting saying front and rear Swaybar Endlinks actually make a bit of a difference. And the way I'm looking at it, the way those fronts are designed, think of trucks, you know, fully boxed frame is what a lot of trucks like to advertise for a more structural framing of a pickup truck. And if you think about it, that was a not fully boxed frame of a piece of metal. It was a C shape, therefore it didn't have all four sides. The ones that are on it now, the ECS Tuning ones, are nice solid aluminum and they are round, which is extremely strong. So I think that is definitely making it to where there's less flex, because every time the wheel goes up or down, it's pushing that Swaybar Endlink to the sway bar, and there's got to be some give or some flex, I think, with those stock ones. So now, with these ones being much more strong, and the fact that I've lengthened them just a tad to make it to where the sway bar is at its original angle, I think that is going to help, obviously, because when a wheel goes up, the sway bar onto the other side is going to help pull that wheel up as well to give you a flatter turn, and I think a better handling characteristic. And if we just go around mid-boost, the car just feels a little bit firmer and just a smoother direct steer from left to right. I know it's subtle, it's not like gonna blow your socks off different, but there is something. And honestly, right there, I felt like there was just that much less input flooring it. There, again, there's that front-wheel driveness in this car. It's taken some of that away. There is hardly any input at all when I accelerate full throttle in this car now. It's very subtle, but I'm totally noticing something. I hope it's not just psychosomatic, but it definitely corners a little better. You can still feel the rear kind of following a little later when you're really quick back to back, but when you're in the nice sweepers, not super aggressive, it is just a little bit more firm in the turning. So I think we have gotten one step closer to solving the weird handling with the RS3. I know a lot of people who own the cars, like half of the people who own them, kind of hear what I'm saying and they feel the same things. The other half you know, hear the good reviews and just say the car's the greatest handling car ever, and they haven't really driven the car probably enough to know, and probably haven't driven enough other cars to really fine-tune what's a little odd about this car. But the handling is a little odd comparing it to other cars. I think a lot goes to the fact that the front tires are wider, not only the tire themselves, but the track width is wider, and then the front-wheel drive bias system. I think those two characteristics make this car a little weird compared to what I'm at least used to. So, getting up to speed. Yeah, for sure, normally if I do a full throttle first second, there is just a little bit of lightness. There was literally no lightness in the steering doing that. So these have absolutely done something. That is so cool, and these are incredibly inexpensive. This is not an expensive modification, really not that hard to install. It was harder for me to install because I was filming, and the camera in there just takes up all the space, so it was just harder for me to do it because of that, but that's really cool. I think I'm gonna have to do rears next. I've seen a lot of comments about the rears as well, so that's gonna have to happen, and then eventually probably just new sway bars in general, and that might fully fix the weird handling, make this thing better. And then maybe eventually do a square setup on the tires. I've heard, again, a lot of you guys saying do a square setup, and that also really just dials it in. Audi, they did a little bit of a weird thing on this car, but we're getting there. That is definitely one step better. So now let's do one last acceleration up the steep hill, and then around the corner from first gear. Sounds so good. I'd say we've cut the input in half from the front wheel drive intervention. Around that sharp turn, I was flooring it still turned, and normally that is really weird feeling. I didn't get that in this. And then around the faster turn at higher speed, just a little bit of steering input. So that's cool. I'm really happy with that. Anyways, that is then it for today's video. We are dialing in the handling on the Audi RS3. Front Swaybar Endlinks, I think, are something you should definitely do. If you've lowered your car a little bit, like I have with the H&R lowering springs, which we also have available down in the description below, I would say about 1/4 to a half an inch longer you want to make your Swaybar Endlinks. That way you're kind of matching that factory size. But that is it. I will see you guys in the next video, and I'm going to keep stealing my wife's car because this thing is a lot more fun every modification.